The sun hung low in the sky, painting the horizon in shades of gold and orange. The wind moved gently through the dry grass, carrying the faint scent of pine from the nearby forest. In a small, lonely cabin at the edge of the clearing, a cowboy worked quietly, tending to his horse. The animal had been tired and limping, and the cowboy knew it needed rest before they could travel any further. He adjusted the saddle and brushed the horse's coat, humming softly to keep himself calm. The cabin was simple, made of rough wooden logs stacked together, with smoke curling from the small stone chimney. Inside, the air smelled faintly of herbs and wood smoke, a comforting reminder that someone cared for this place. It was the kind of home that seemed ordinary at first glance, but it held secrets and stories that only the people who lived nearby could understand. A few miles away, a young woman moved through the forest with practiced ease. She was the chief's daughter, and she knew these woods better than anyone. She could move silently, listening to the sounds of birds and the rustling of leaves, noticing every small detail. Her eyes were sharp, always aware of what was happening around her. Today she had come to check on the cabin, to see if anyone had passed through or left signs of trouble. She knew that danger could come quickly in these lands, and she could not afford to ignore it. As she approached the clearing, she spotted the cowboy outside working with his horse. Her heart beat a little faster, though she quickly dismissed it as worry for the stranger. He seemed capable, calm, and careful, but she had learned not to trust appearances entirely. She stayed hidden for a moment, observing him. His hands moved with experience, the way he handled the horse, adjusted the saddle, and checked the harness. It was clear he had traveled long distances and faced challenges before. The cowboy looked up suddenly, sensing movement in the trees. He squinted against the sunlight, trying to see if anyone was there. For a moment, their eyes met across the clearing. He did not know her, but there was something familiar in her steady gaze. She did not look afraid or startled, only cautious and alert. He nodded slightly, and she returned a small, polite gesture before stepping back into the shadows. The young woman continued to watch for a while, making sure the cabin was safe. She noticed small things, the tracks near the door, the marks on the logs, even the way smoke drifted from the chimney. Each detail told a story, and she read them like a book. The cowboy seemed alone, but she could not be certain. There were signs of preparation, supplies stacked neatly inside, and the fire was maintained carefully. He was cautious, but he did not seem hostile. Eventually, the cowboy finished tending to his horse and led it inside the cabin. He moved quietly, as if aware of eyes on him but uncertain of who might be watching. The door closed behind him, and the sound echoed slightly in the quiet of the forest. The young woman waited a moment longer, ensuring he was safely inside, then slowly made her way toward the cabin, careful to remain unseen at first. When she finally stepped into view, the cowboy noticed her immediately. He was prepared for visitors, but there was something different about her. She did not carry weapons openly, but her posture was confident and strong. She approached with cautious steps, her eyes never leaving his face. There was a mix of curiosity and determination in her expression, as if she had come with a purpose but was willing to assess the situation first. "I did not expect anyone here," the cowboy said, his voice calm and steady. "This is a quiet place." "I could say the same," she replied softly, her voice carrying a natural strength. "I was just checking the area. I have seen travelers, but it is rare to find someone stopping here." He nodded, understanding her meaning. The cabin was remote, a place where few people came. It offered safety and solitude, but it also meant that help was far away if trouble arrived. He gestured toward the fire and the supplies inside. "If you need to rest or eat, there is enough here. You are welcome." She hesitated for a moment, then smiled faintly. "Thank you. I will not stay long. I am just making sure everything is safe." They both moved inside, the wooden floor creaking under their weight. The cabin was small but tidy, with simple furnishings that suggested someone lived carefully and thoughtfully. There was a sense of order, and it spoke of someone who valued preparation and self-reliance. The cowboy led her to the fire, and she sat quietly, observing the small space, noting the details he had not mentioned. The way he kept his tools organized, the way the fire was managed, even the small herbs hanging near the window, everything suggested a person who knew how to survive and take care of themselves. As they shared the space, a quiet conversation began. They spoke of simple things at first: the weather, the forest, the animals. But beneath the small talk, there was an understanding growing between them. The young woman was drawn to the cowboy's calm demeanor and quiet strength, while he was intrigued by her alertness and confidence. There was no rush, no pressure, just two people sharing a moment in a world that could be harsh and unpredictable. Outside, the forest seemed to hold its breath. The wind moved gently through the trees, carrying distant sounds that neither of them could yet identify. Birds called softly, and the rustling of leaves was almost like a whisper. The cowboy occasionally glanced toward the window, sensing the stillness, aware that life in these lands was often unpredictable. The young woman also remained alert, her instincts finely tuned. She knew that danger could come swiftly, even in a place that seemed peaceful. As the day turned to evening, the cabin filled with the soft glow of the fire. Shadows danced on the walls and the atmosphere felt intimate and tense at the same time. They shared stories of their past in small pieces, revealing just enough to build trust without giving away too much. The cowboy spoke of his travels, the places he had seen, and the challenges he had faced. She listened carefully, asking questions that showed both interest and intelligence. Her own stories were more guarded, hints of life in the forest, lessons learned from her people, and the strength required to survive in the wilderness. At one point, the cowboy looked at her seriously. "You know these woods well," he said. "I would not have lasted long without understanding the land." She smiled, a mix of pride and modesty. "It is what I have been taught. But even I have to be cautious. There are always dangers, even in familiar places." Their conversation continued as the fire crackled, the night growing darker around them. They spoke of hopes, of challenges, of small dreams that seemed far away in a world that demanded constant vigilance. There was a sense of connection forming, not rushed or forced, but steady and natural. Each glance, each careful word built a foundation of understanding and trust. Suddenly, a distant sound reached their ears, a faint noise carried on the wind. The cowboy paused, listening intently, his body tensing slightly. The young woman's eyes narrowed as she too picked up the sound, her instincts telling her to be ready. Neither spoke immediately, each waiting to see if it was a passing animal or something more serious. The forest seemed alive with quiet tension, and the stillness of the night made every sound more pronounced. After a moment, the noise faded, leaving only the rustling of the leaves and the crackling of the fire. They both relaxed slightly, but the alertness remained. In a place like this, one could never be too careful. The young woman's attention returned to the cowboy, who was quietly tending the fire, adjusting it to keep the warmth steady. She noticed the small movements, the way he handled the flames with care, and felt a deep respect for his skill and patience. The night wore on, and the cabin became a small haven against the vast wilderness outside. They shared more quiet moments, sometimes in conversation, sometimes in silence, each comfortable with the other's presence. It was a rare feeling, the kind that comes from trust and mutual understanding. The young woman realized she could focus entirely on him, on the way he carried himself, the way he observed the world without fear or distraction. Outside, the forest continued its quiet rhythm. The wind whispered through the trees, and the night creatures moved softly in the darkness. The cowboy and the young woman remained inside, a small island of calm in a vast and unpredictable world. Their connection was subtle but growing, built on shared experience, respect, and the unspoken acknowledgement that in these lands, strength and courage were essential for survival. As the fire burned low, they both felt a sense of peace, however temporary it might be. They knew the wilderness could change at any moment and danger could appear without warning. But for now they had this moment, this quiet space to observe, learn, and trust one another. It was a beginning, a first chapter in a story that neither of them could yet fully imagine, but one that held promise and intrigue. In the soft glow of the firelight, the cowboy looked at the young woman and saw not just a visitor, but a presence that would change the rhythm of his journey. She in turn observed him with the same quiet intensity, recognizing someone capable, reliable, and attentive. Neither spoke of the future or the dangers that might come, but both felt the bond forming silently, a connection that would shape the days ahead. And so the first night passed with the fire flickering, shadows moving gently on the walls, and two people finding a rare moment of trust and understanding in a land where the wilderness could be both beautiful and unforgiving. The cowboy tended his horse, the young woman kept watch, and the quiet bond between them grew stronger with each passing hour, unnoticed by the vast forest that surrounded them. The night grew deeper, and the forest seemed to tighten around the small cabin, the shadow stretching longer as the fire flickered inside. The cowboy kept watch by the window, his eyes scanning the edge of the clearing, alert to every sound. The young woman sat quietly near the fire, listening to the whispers of the trees and the distant calls of nocturnal birds. Though the cabin felt like a safe haven, the air carried a tension that neither of them could ignore. Somewhere in the distance, faint movement stirred. The wind shifted, carrying subtle sounds that were almost too soft to hear. The young woman straightened, her instincts sharpening instantly. She moved to the window, peering into the darkness, seeing shapes that seemed to glide among the trees. Her heart beat faster, though she remained calm, her mind analyzing every shadow, every rustle. "Do you hear that?" she asked quietly. The cowboy nodded, squinting into the darkness. "Something's moving out there. Could be animals, could be more. Stay close." They both listened. The sounds grew louder, a steady rhythm of movement that hinted at more than just wandering creatures. The young woman's face remained composed, but her eyes never left the clearing. She recognized the signs. Too many feet, too synchronized to be just animals. Someone was approaching, and not just a few people. She swallowed the quick rise of tension in her chest, knowing she had to stay composed. Hours seemed to pass as they watched silently, neither wanting to alert the others prematurely. Then shapes began to emerge clearly, figures moving with precision through the trees surrounding the cabin. The young woman's stomach tightened at the sight of the warriors, recognizing their numbers and the seriousness of the threat. She did not panic. Instead, she focused her mind, considering every option. The cowboy followed her gaze, his own expression tightening as he took in the scale of the encirclement. "We need to be ready," he said, his voice calm but firm. "They might not be here to talk." She nodded, her eyes scanning the positions of the warriors. "We should barricade the doors and windows. Keep quiet. Watch for any weaknesses." They moved efficiently, working together without words for a while. The cowboy shifted supplies and stacked furniture against the doors. The young woman used her knowledge of the cabin and the surrounding land to suggest where they could make small adjustments, creating subtle advantages. Each movement was deliberate, measured, and careful. The silence of the night made every sound sharper. The creak of the floorboards, the crackle of the fire, the distant footsteps outside. Time seemed to stretch as they prepared, the tension building with every passing moment. Outside, the warriors circled closer, their presence overwhelming yet strangely disciplined. The young woman felt a mixture of fear and admiration. They were organized, capable, and aware of their surroundings. But she also trusted her instincts and the skills she had learned in the forest. She had faced dangerous situations before, but nothing had prepared her for the intensity of this encirclement. The cowboy adjusted his stance near the door, checking his rifle and ammunition, making sure everything was within reach. He glanced at the young woman who was silently observing the movements outside. "You've been through this before, haven't you?" he asked. She gave a small, tight-lipped smile. "More than once. You learned to watch, to wait, and to act at the right moment. Panic doesn't help." He nodded, appreciating her composure. There was a quiet understanding forming between them, a bond built on shared focus and the awareness that their survival depended on their ability to act together. Neither spoke more than necessary, conserving energy and keeping their minds sharp. Outside, the movements of the warriors became more visible as they approached the clearing. The young woman's eyes followed each one, noting the patterns, the weapons they carried, the signals they used. She had learned to read people as well as the land, understanding intentions through subtle gestures. The cowboy did the same, relying on experience and instinct, watching the shadows, listening to the night. Together they formed a small, silent team, aware of the danger yet refusing to succumb to fear. The first contact was sudden. A branch snapped underfoot outside, and the warriors paused, their formation tightening. The young woman pressed herself low, her hand reaching for a small dagger she kept hidden at her waist. The cowboy steadied himself, gripping his rifle, eyes narrowed, calculating the distance and possible outcomes. The moment stretched, a fragile thread between calm and chaos. Then one of the warriors stepped slightly into the light of the fire, revealing a face, not angry, not aggressive, but watchful. He signaled something to the others, and the encirclement seemed to adjust with precision as if guided by an invisible command. The young woman felt her pulse quicken, but her attention remained fixed on the cowboy, gauging his reactions, sensing his strength and resolve. "They're organized," she whispered. "That's an understatement," he replied quietly. "We have to be smart. Every move matters." The minutes dragged on, each second heavy with anticipation. The young woman suggested small changes to their positions, shifting supplies, adjusting the firelight to create shadows that would confuse the observers outside. The cowboy followed her guidance, impressed by her understanding of strategy and terrain. Each act was deliberate, meant to protect themselves without provoking unnecessary aggression. The warriors continued to watch, their presence a silent reminder of the power they wielded. Yet the young woman remained focused on the cowboy, seeing in him a steady courage that balanced her own skills. There was a strange comfort in the connection, a sense that they were not facing this challenge alone, even though the threat outside was immense. Hours passed, the night stretching long and heavy. The young woman and the cowboy maintained their positions, taking turns observing, resting, and adjusting their defenses. They spoke rarely, conserving energy and focus, but every word carried meaning and understanding. The fire burned steadily, casting light and shadows that moved across their faces, highlighting the tension and determination in their expressions. At one point, the young woman moved closer to the window, her eyes scanning the forest once more. She saw the warriors shifting slightly, discussing in quiet tones, their signals precise and coordinated. She felt a mix of respect and wariness, knowing that these were skilled people capable of swift action. Yet her attention kept returning to the cowboy, noticing the way he stayed calm, calculating, ready for anything. "We need to be prepared for anything," she said, her voice steady. "They might test us or they might wait. Either way, we cannot let fear control us." He nodded, appreciating her focus. "Agreed, we stay alert. We stay smart. We stay together." The night deepened and the forest seemed to close in even more. The encirclement remained, a constant, silent pressure that tested their patience and courage. They took small actions to reinforce the cabin's defenses, checking the doors, windows, and corners. Each movement was careful, deliberate, and coordinated, a silent dance between strategy and survival. As the hours passed, a strange quiet settled over the clearing. The warriors remained outside, their presence looming, but no immediate threat was made. The young woman and the cowboy remained vigilant, knowing that the calm could be temporary. They shared small gestures of reassurance, a nod, a glance, a slight smile, silent acknowledgments of trust and shared responsibility. The fire burned low, casting a warm, flickering light across the cabin. Inside, the air was tense yet focused, the bond between the two people growing stronger under the weight of shared danger. They spoke quietly, exchanging thoughts on strategy, survival, and the land around them. Their conversation was practical, but carried an unspoken emotional connection, a recognition of mutual respect and understanding. The first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, softening the shadows and changing the colors of the forest. The young woman and the cowboy continued their watch, but there was a sense of hope, a subtle shift in the tension. The warriors outside remained alert, but the immediate danger seemed to ease slightly as the night gave way to morning. Even as the day began, both remained alert, knowing the situation was far from resolved. Yet in this small cabin, surrounded by the forest and the quiet threat outside, they had found a shared strength. Their connection was no longer just about survival. It was about trust, courage, and the understanding that even in the face of overwhelming odds, they could rely on each other. The young woman glanced at the cowboy, her eyes meeting his with a quiet intensity. "We made it through the night," she said softly. "Yes," he replied, his voice steady. "And we will face whatever comes next together." Outside, the warriors continued their watch, a silent reminder that the world was unpredictable, full of danger and uncertainty. But inside the cabin, the two of them stood side by side, ready for what the day might bring, their focus unwavering, their bond strengthened by the night they had survived together. The sun had risen fully, casting light across the clearing and illuminating the cabin. The first glow of morning made the forest look peaceful, but the tension remained heavy. Outside, the warriors stayed in formation, their shadows long and steady in the early light. The young woman and the cowboy continued their watch, understanding that the night's survival had not ended the threat. It had only made the danger more clear. The cowboy adjusted his rifle, checking its condition and ensuring it was ready if needed. He moved quietly, careful not to alert the warriors. The young woman remained near the window, her sharp eyes following every movement outside. She could read their positions, their gestures, and even the subtle cues that told her what they might be thinking. Her focus was complete, but her attention kept returning to the cowboy. There was something about the way he handled himself, calm and ready, that drew her eyes again and again. One of the warriors stepped forward, a signal to the others. They moved slightly closer, keeping their distance but showing they were aware and prepared. The young woman's pulse quickened, but she did not speak, letting the cowboy take the lead in gauging their intentions. His experience told him that any sudden movement could trigger a response, so he stayed patient and calm. A few moments passed before the first voice broke the silence. It was not loud, only enough to be heard over the morning wind. "We do not wish to harm," the voice said, calm and measured. The words carried authority, and both the young woman and the cowboy could sense the leader behind them. The young woman's eyes flicked toward the cowboy, seeing his careful assessment of the situation. He nodded slightly, acknowledging the attempt at communication. The young woman spoke softly, her voice steady. "We are not seeking trouble either. We mean no harm, but we must protect ourselves." There was a pause before the voice responded. "We only wish to speak. No need for conflict if understanding is possible." The tone was firm but not threatening, a subtle invitation to negotiation. The cowboy lowered his rifle slightly, showing cautious trust but not vulnerability. "Very well. We will listen." The warriors adjusted their formation slightly, keeping their distance while still maintaining control of the clearing. The young woman relaxed a fraction but stayed alert. She could sense the underlying tension, the readiness for action, and the respect for the cowboy's presence. She knew that the next moments would be delicate and that every word mattered. One of the warriors stepped closer to the cabin, his hands raised slightly to show no aggression. The young woman's hand moved to the small dagger at her waist just in case, but she kept her body calm and composed. The cowboy met the warrior's gaze steadily, showing no fear, only readiness. There was a silent exchange of understanding, a balance of respect and caution. The conversation continued, slow and careful. The cowboy and the warrior spoke of boundaries, of the need for safety, and of the importance of understanding. The young woman observed closely, noting every gesture, every subtle change in tone. She could see the leadership among the warriors, the discipline and the recognition of the cowboy's composure. She admired their strength, but her focus remained on the man beside her, sensing his skill and intelligence in navigating the tense moment. The first hour of negotiation passed and the atmosphere slowly shifted. The warriors were still near, but their movements were less tense, more measured. The young woman began to feel a sense of cautious optimism, knowing that their careful approach and the cowboy's calm demeanor had earned respect. The connection between the two of them became more apparent, each recognizing the other's value in the situation. Suddenly, a minor misstep outside, a branch breaking underfoot, caused a ripple of tension. The warriors tensed again, hands moving closer to weapons, but the cowboy's calm presence prevented panic. He motioned for quiet, and the young woman mirrored his action, showing confidence and control. The moment passed without escalation, reinforcing the understanding between them. They continued to negotiate in small steps, finding common ground. The warriors respected the boundaries of the cabin, while the cowboy and the young woman acknowledged the presence of the outsiders and the need for communication. Each word, each gesture was carefully measured, balancing safety with diplomacy. The young woman's focus never wavered from the cowboy, noticing how he balanced patience, authority, and empathy. By midday, the tension had eased slightly, though the forest remained filled with quiet anticipation. The young woman moved to adjust the fire, keeping its warmth steady while maintaining visibility inside the cabin. The cowboy continued to monitor the clearing, his eyes scanning every movement. There was a rhythm to their actions, a silent teamwork that had developed through shared danger and mutual respect. As they worked, the young woman spoke softly, almost to herself. "We have to remember that strength is not just about force. Sometimes it is about patience, understanding, and knowing when to act." The cowboy nodded, appreciating the wisdom in her words. Outside, the warriors shifted once more, signaling to each other but not advancing further. There was an unspoken acknowledgement that the cabin and its occupants were respected, at least for now. The young woman felt a small sense of relief, but her alertness remained. Danger could return at any moment, and she would not let her guard down completely. The afternoon passed slowly, filled with careful observation, quiet conversation, and moments of shared attention. The cowboy and the young woman continued to develop their bond, finding comfort in the presence of someone who understood the tension of the moment. Their glances, small gestures, and silent exchanges carried more meaning than words could express. At one point, the young woman suggested small adjustments to their defensive positions, using her knowledge of the terrain and the cabin. The cowboy followed her guidance, impressed by her skill and insight. Together, they created subtle advantages that increased their confidence without provoking the warriors outside. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, the atmosphere shifted again. The light cast long shadows across the clearing, making the warriors more visible and highlighting the stillness of the forest. The young woman moved closer to the window, her eyes scanning for any signs of sudden movement. The cowboy remained near the door, rifle ready but calm, his focus absolute. A sudden signal from one of the warriors brought a brief pause to the standoff. The young woman recognized the gesture as a form of communication, possibly a message from their leader. The cowboy and the young woman exchanged a glance, understanding that the moment required careful observation and patience. They stayed silent, letting the warriors make their move without responding hastily. Time seemed to stretch, each second heavy with tension. The young woman and the cowboy maintained their focus, aware that any misstep could escalate the situation. Yet there was also a growing sense of trust, between themselves and even in some small measure, toward the disciplined warriors outside. The cowboy's calm authority and the young woman's sharp instincts had created a fragile balance, one that allowed them to face the standoff without panic. The evening grew cooler, and the fire inside the cabin burned steadily, providing warmth and light. They spoke in hushed tones, sharing observations, thoughts, and small reassurances. The young woman noticed how the cowboy handled the delicate negotiation, balancing caution and authority, and she admired the skill it took to remain composed under such pressure. Outside, the warriors eventually relaxed slightly, their presence still formidable but less threatening. The young woman allowed herself a moment of reflection, recognizing that their combined patience and intelligence had prevented immediate conflict. She glanced at the cowboy, who returned her look with a quiet acknowledgement of their shared success. As the night approached, the young woman and the cowboy prepared for the next phase of vigilance. They reinforced small areas of the cabin, checked supplies, and ensured that their positions remained strong. Their movements were coordinated, silent, and efficient, a reflection of their growing teamwork. In the quiet moments between preparation, the young woman focused on the cowboy. She noticed the way he observed, calculated, and adapted, and she felt a growing respect and connection. He in turn observed her calm composure and sharp instincts, understanding how essential her presence had been throughout the tense hours. The night settled over the forest, stars beginning to appear in the sky. The warriors remained outside, their shadows blending with the darkness, a constant reminder of the potential for danger. Inside the cabin, the young woman and the cowboy shared a quiet moment by the fire, reflecting on the day's events and the delicate balance they had maintained. Neither spoke of the future or the uncertainties that lay ahead. Instead, they focused on the present, on the trust they had built and the strength they had shown together. The standoff had not ended, but they had faced it with patience, strategy, and calm determination. In the warmth of the firelight, they sat side by side, knowing that their bond was more than temporary. It was forged in the tension of the standoff, in the shared awareness of danger, and in the quiet understanding that they could rely on each other. The young woman's eyes met the cowboy's, and in that silent glance, they acknowledged the depth of their connection, a connection that would guide them through whatever challenges lay ahead. The first night of the standoff passed with careful vigilance, quiet strategies, and mutual respect. Outside, the forest remained watchful, the warriors disciplined, but the cabin held its ground. Inside, the two of them had discovered not only their own strength but the power of trust and teamwork in a world where danger could arrive without warning. The standoff had tested them, shaped them, and connected them in ways that words alone could not capture. The next morning broke quietly, with soft sunlight filtering through the trees and painting the cabin in warm hues. Outside, the warriors remained in their positions, but something in their formation suggested hesitation. The young woman noticed it immediately. She moved to the window, observing the subtle signals among the warriors, their gestures less rigid, their movements slightly slower than before. She felt a glimmer of opportunity. Perhaps the balance of tension could be shifted with careful action. The cowboy was already preparing for the day, checking supplies and ensuring the cabin's defenses were intact. He noticed the young woman studying the outside, her expression focused and thoughtful. He understood without words that she had an idea forming, a plan to influence the situation. He respected her instincts and experience, trusting her judgment as much as his own. "They are hesitating," she whispered. "There is room to act." The cowboy nodded. "Then we proceed carefully. Every word, every gesture counts." Together they moved through the cabin, making small adjustments to their positions. They reinforced the doors and windows quietly, but with deliberate care to avoid drawing attention. The young woman paused at a small opening in the wall, one she had noticed the previous night, and peered through it. From there she could see the leader of the warriors giving subtle signals, his eyes scanning the clearing, assessing the situation. Her mind raced, considering how to use this moment to their advantage. The cowboy observed her, recognizing the intensity in her gaze. "What are you thinking?" he asked softly. "We need to show them respect but also resolve," she replied. "We cannot appear weak, but we must communicate that we are not their enemy." He agreed, understanding the delicate balance required. They began to make small signs of their own, movements that conveyed awareness and preparedness without aggression. The young woman carefully stepped closer to the door, showing herself briefly in a calm and non-threatening posture. The cowboy stayed slightly behind her, steady and alert, ready to intervene if needed. The leader of the warriors paused, his eyes fixed on the young woman. He seemed to understand her gesture, recognizing both her authority and her connection to the land. Slowly, he signaled his men to ease their formation, a subtle shift that indicated willingness to communicate. The young woman noticed immediately and signaled back, a small, respectful nod, acknowledging the mutual understanding forming in the clearing. The cowboy moved closer, his voice calm but firm. "We want peace," he said. "We have no intention of conflict, but we will protect ourselves." The leader of the warriors responded, his voice steady. "We respect your strength and your caution. We wish only to ensure safety for all." The young woman felt a wave of relief. The tone was firm but fair, a sign that the dangerous tension could be eased without confrontation. She turned to the cowboy, who gave her a small, approving nod. Together they continued to communicate with subtle gestures, showing discipline, patience, and intelligence. As the day progressed, the young woman took a more active role. She moved closer to the window again, observing patterns, anticipating movements, and subtly guiding the cowboy's responses. Her focus never wavered from him, though her attention to the warriors was absolute. She noticed their slight hesitation, the unspoken questions in their eyes, and the careful respect they were beginning to show. The cowboy followed her guidance, adjusting their positions, speaking calmly to the leader, and maintaining a steady presence. Their teamwork became more fluid, a silent understanding of strategy and communication. The young woman's insights and observations proved invaluable, allowing them to navigate the delicate balance between authority and diplomacy. Outside, the warriors shifted again, their signals indicating discussion and internal deliberation. The young woman recognized that the chief's influence was at work through them, and she understood the importance of her own role in the moment. She stepped forward slightly, raising her hand in a gesture of calm acknowledgement, a sign that reinforced their willingness to communicate peacefully. The cowboy spoke softly to her, his tone steady. "You have their attention." She nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility but also the strength of her instincts. "We can guide this if we remain calm and deliberate." Time passed, each movement measured and intentional. The warriors began to circle more loosely, their previous rigidity giving way to a cautious trust. The young woman's careful focus and subtle influence played a key role, allowing the cowboy to maintain a strong presence while avoiding unnecessary confrontation. Their coordination created an unspoken rhythm, a delicate dance of patience, respect, and strategic action. By late afternoon, the clearing had shifted subtly. The warriors remained near, but their movements were less tense and the threat of immediate aggression had diminished. The young woman and the cowboy exchanged a glance, a shared understanding passing between them. Their combined efforts had created a turning point, a moment where strategy, intelligence, and calm composure had begun to influence the outcome. The young woman stepped away from the window briefly, moving closer to the cowboy. "We have gained their respect," she said quietly. "Now we must maintain it." He nodded, appreciating her insight. "We stay vigilant, we stay aware, and we do not provoke. That is how we hold this moment." Together they prepared for the evening, reinforcing small areas of the cabin and ensuring that supplies were accessible. They moved with quiet efficiency, their teamwork refined by the events of the day. Each gesture, each glance carried meaning, reinforcing trust and demonstrating control and intelligence. As the sun began to set, the young woman took another careful look through the opening in the wall. The warriors' movements had changed, more measured, less rigid, and their signals suggested discussion rather than aggression. She felt a cautious optimism, knowing that the situation had shifted in their favor. The cowboy joined her, sharing her observation and appreciating the subtlety of their influence. The leader of the warriors finally stepped forward, approaching the edge of the clearing cautiously. His voice carried across the space, calm and deliberate. "We recognize your strength and wisdom. We will not force conflict." The young woman felt a deep sense of relief but remained composed. "We are grateful for your respect," she replied, her voice steady. "We will continue to ensure safety and understanding." The cowboy added his calm presence to the conversation, reinforcing their position and maintaining the delicate balance. "Our goal is peace," he said. "We respect your people and your land." A quiet understanding settled over the clearing. The warriors maintained their positions, but the atmosphere had shifted, the tension eased, and the threat of immediate conflict had diminished. The young woman and the cowboy had created a turning point, a moment where patience, strategy, and courage had allowed them to influence the situation positively. As evening fell, they sat together by the fire, reflecting on the day. The young woman's eyes met the cowboy's, and in that silent moment a shared acknowledgement passed between them. They had faced the peak of tension and emerged with trust, respect, and a strengthened connection. Their focus on strategy and careful action had turned potential danger into an opportunity for understanding. The night settled over the forest, the firelight flickering gently across the cabin walls. Outside, the warriors remained disciplined, but the previous rigidity had softened. The young woman and the cowboy maintained their vigilance, knowing that the situation required continued awareness, but they also recognized the importance of the turning point they had achieved. In the quiet moments before sleep, the young woman and the cowboy shared a brief conversation about what had happened. "We managed to influence them," she said softly, "not with force but with awareness and patience." He nodded, a faint smile on his face. "That is the strongest form of power. We acted wisely, together." The night was calm, the forest holding its breath around the cabin. They felt a sense of accomplishment, tempered by the awareness that vigilance would always be necessary. The turning point had been achieved, but the journey was far from over. Their bond had strengthened, built on shared courage, understanding, and the quiet acknowledgement of trust and respect. As they settled for the night, the young woman kept a careful watch over the cabin while the cowboy rested, prepared for whatever might come next. The balance of power had shifted subtly, but it was fragile, dependent on their continued intelligence and cooperation. They understood that the wilderness was unpredictable, that the warriors outside remained capable and disciplined, and that every action in the days ahead would need to be deliberate and measured. In the warmth of the firelight, they found a small moment of peace, a quiet recognition of their shared success and the depth of their connection. The turning point had been reached, and with it came hope, understanding, and the knowledge that they could face the challenges ahead together, guided by patience, courage, and mutual trust. The night embraced the cabin, the shadows dancing softly on the walls, and within, the two of them remained focused, aware and united, ready for whatever the next day might bring. The next morning arrived with a soft glow over the forest, the sunlight streaming through the trees and warming the small cabin. Outside, the warriors had shifted again, but their movements were now calm and measured, no longer tense or threatening. The young woman and the cowboy remained alert, but there was a quiet sense of relief and accomplishment between them. The turning point of the previous day had shifted the balance, and now the possibility of a peaceful resolution seemed real. The cowboy moved quietly through the cabin, checking the remaining supplies and ensuring everything was in order. He glanced toward the young woman who was standing near the window, observing the clearing with steady eyes. Her attention was focused, but she seemed more relaxed than before, a subtle smile playing on her lips. The connection between them, forged through shared tension and careful strategy, had deepened. Each had come to rely on the other, trusting instincts, judgment, and courage. The warriors outside appeared to be discussing among themselves, their gestures calm and deliberate. The young woman recognized the signs. They were consulting, perhaps debating their next steps, but there was no indication of hostility. She signaled to the cowboy, and he nodded, understanding that patience would continue to be their greatest ally. A gentle breeze carried the faint sounds of the forest, the rustling of leaves and the distant calls of birds. The cowboy spoke quietly, not wanting to disturb the fragile calm. "It seems they are considering a path that avoids conflict." The young woman nodded. "We have shown strength but also respect. That is what they are responding to." Together they moved toward the front of the cabin, keeping their movements deliberate and non-threatening. The cowboy stepped slightly back, allowing the young woman to lead the way, her presence commanding yet calm. She understood the importance of showing authority and respect simultaneously. Her gestures and posture communicated confidence and intelligence, and the warriors outside seemed to respond. One of the leaders of the warriors stepped forward, keeping his distance but signaling his intention to speak. The young woman and the cowboy remained calm, their expressions neutral but attentive. The leader's voice carried across the clearing, steady and clear. "We have observed your actions and your respect for these lands. We recognize your strength and your wisdom." The young woman responded with a calm voice, her tone firm but respectful. "We mean no harm. Our goal is understanding and safety. We are willing to coexist peacefully if respect and care are maintained." The leader nodded slowly, signaling to his warriors. There was a brief pause, then a slight shift in formation. The tension that had filled the previous days seemed to lift slightly, replaced by a cautious acknowledgement of mutual understanding. The young woman glanced at the cowboy, who gave her a small nod of approval. Their efforts had created a bridge between two worlds that could have collided violently. As the day wore on, the warriors gradually withdrew their proximity, maintaining a respectful distance. Their posture and movements indicated recognition of the young woman and cowboy's authority and skill. It was a delicate balance, but one that had been achieved through patience, strategy, and composure. The young woman felt a quiet pride, understanding that her careful actions had influenced the outcome. The cowboy spoke softly, sharing his thoughts with her. "Your insight and calmness have made all the difference. We could not have managed this alone." She returned his gaze with a gentle smile. "We acted together. That is what mattered." The forest seemed to breathe again, the rustling of leaves and distant bird calls now carrying a sense of normalcy. The young woman and the cowboy continued to monitor the clearing, but their movements were now relaxed, confident in the peaceful outcome they had guided. The connection between them remained strong, built on shared danger, trust, and the understanding that true strength comes from cooperation and respect. By late afternoon, the warriors had moved further back, maintaining observation but allowing the cabin its space. The young woman and the cowboy continued to work quietly inside, reinforcing the cabin where needed and preparing supplies for the coming days. Their coordination and understanding had grown, each anticipating the other's actions and needs. It was a partnership built not just on necessity, but on admiration and shared intelligence. The young woman paused for a moment, reflecting on the events of the past days. The sense of relief was tempered by awareness that the wilderness remained unpredictable, that danger could return at any time. Yet there was a quiet hope in the air, a feeling that understanding and respect had created a foundation for peaceful coexistence. She glanced at the cowboy who was tending to the fire, and felt a deep appreciation for his steadiness, courage, and thoughtfulness. As evening approached, the cabin glowed with warmth from the fire, and the shadows of the forest lengthened, The young woman and the cowboy shared a quiet meal, speaking softly about their observations, plans, and reflections on the events. Their conversation was calm but meaningful, a testament to the bond they had forged. Each word carried weight. Each glance conveyed understanding and trust. Outside, the forest remained quiet, the warriors maintaining their positions but showing no signs of aggression. The young woman and the cowboy could feel the shift in energy, the respect, the recognition of intelligence and composure, and the acknowledgement that conflict had been avoided. It was a rare and valuable outcome, achieved through careful action and mutual awareness. The cowboy looked toward the young woman, his voice soft. "We faced a great challenge and we have come through it. I could not have done it without you." She met his eyes, her expression calm and confident. "We faced it together. That is what matters." The evening deepened, and the fire burned low, casting warm light across the cabin. The young woman moved closer to the window, observing the forest one last time before nightfall. The warriors remained in place, disciplined but peaceful, their presence no longer threatening. The young woman felt a sense of accomplishment, knowing that careful action, awareness, and respect had influenced the outcome. The cowboy joined her, his gaze steady. They shared a moment of silent reflection, acknowledging the tension that had passed and the bond that had grown between them. The connection was subtle but profound, built on shared experience, courage, and the mutual understanding that they could rely on each other. Night fell, and the forest embraced the cabin in quiet darkness. The young woman and the cowboy maintained their vigilance, but their movements were now relaxed, confident in the peace they had guided. They spoke softly of plans, survival, and the future, acknowledging that the challenges of the wilderness were ongoing, but that they had proven their ability to navigate them together. The firelight flickered across their faces, casting shadows that danced on the walls of the cabin. They shared small gestures of reassurance, a nod, a glance, a quiet smile, each reinforcing the trust and connection that had developed. The young woman's eyes met the cowboy's, and in that silent exchange, they acknowledged the depth of their partnership, forged through tension, strategy, and mutual respect. As the night continued, they reflected on the lessons learned: patience, intelligence, courage, and the importance of trust. The young woman understood that her influence had helped shape the outcome, guiding the warriors and ensuring safety without aggression. The cowboy recognized the value of her instincts and wisdom, knowing that their combined skills had been essential. The wilderness outside remained unpredictable, but the cabin had become a symbol of resilience, awareness, and cooperation. The young woman and the cowboy had faced potential conflict and emerged with trust, respect, and a strengthened connection. They had turned tension into understanding, danger into opportunity, and isolation into partnership. In the quiet of the night, they settled near the fire, the cabin warm and safe. Their thoughts lingered on the events, the delicate balance of strategy and diplomacy, and the profound trust that had developed between them. The young woman's gaze softened as she looked at the cowboy, recognizing the courage and patience that had guided them both through the tense standoff. The cowboy returned her gaze, a quiet smile acknowledging the bond that had grown stronger through shared challenge. They did not need words to express the depth of understanding and respect between them. It was a connection forged in experience, observation, and shared courage, one that would endure beyond the immediate threat. As dawn approached, the forest remained quiet, the warriors having retreated to a respectful distance, their presence no longer a source of tension. The young woman and the cowboy prepared for the day, ensuring supplies were ready, positions were secure, and the cabin remained safe. Their movements were calm, coordinated, and purposeful, reflecting the trust and understanding that had developed. The first light of morning brought clarity and peace. The young woman and the cowboy stood side by side, looking out at the clearing and the distant forest. They felt a quiet satisfaction in their efforts, knowing that careful observation, patience, and mutual respect had guided them through a difficult and dangerous period. The warriors remained aware but non-threatening, the balance of power shifted by intelligence and composure. The cowboy spoke softly, his voice carrying gratitude and acknowledgement. "We have learned much and we have succeeded in keeping peace." The young woman nodded, a small smile reflecting pride and understanding. "We have faced danger together, and we have proven our strength." That is what matters. The fire burned steadily, casting warm light across the cabin, and the forest outside seemed to breathe with quiet life. The young woman and the cowboy knew that the wilderness was always unpredictable, but they had found resilience, trust, and companionship. They had faced uncertainty and emerged stronger. Their connection deepened by shared experience and understanding. As the day began, they moved through the cabin with calm determination, each action deliberate, each glance carrying meaning. The wilderness remained vast and unpredictable, but the cabin was a safe space, a place where trust, strategy, and courage had created a lasting impact. The young woman and the cowboy had not only survived, they had built understanding, respect, and a partnership that would guide them in the days ahead. The sun climbed higher, illuminating the clearing and forest with warm light. The warriors remained visible at a distance, maintaining awareness but offering peace. The young woman and the cowboy took a moment to reflect on the journey, recognizing the courage, intelligence, and patience that had shaped the outcome. Their bond was unspoken yet profound, a connection forged through shared tension, careful strategy, and unwavering trust. The cabin, surrounded by the vast wilderness, stood as a symbol of resilience and mutual understanding. The young woman and the cowboy had faced potential danger, managed to influence the outcome through calm action, and emerged with a deep connection that went beyond words. The lessons learned would guide them, and their partnership, rooted in trust and respect, would endure whatever challenges lay ahead. As the day continued, the young woman and the cowboy shared a final glance at the clearing, a silent acknowledgement of what had been achieved. The warriors maintained a respectful distance, the tension dissolved, and the cabin remained secure. They had turned a potentially violent situation into one of understanding, demonstrating that patience, intelligence, and courage could shape outcomes and create lasting bonds. In the quiet warmth of the cabin, they prepared for the day with calm focus, ready for whatever the wilderness might bring. Their journey together had been defined by challenge, strategy, and shared trust. The events that had unfolded would remain a defining moment, a testament to the power of patience, observation, and human connection in the face of danger. And as they moved forward side by side, they knew that together they could face the uncertainties of the world, strengthened by the bond they had forged in the shadows of the forest and the light of understanding.